Rick Sallman. I'm a local beekeeper. I've been keeping bees for 40 years. I started in high school, and it's my passion in life. I do it, well, this time of the year I'm out from sunup to sundown in the bee yards, managing them and making sure that they don't swarm and making sure they all have queens, making sure they're healthy and ready for the honey flow. And the honey flow is when flowers start blooming like they are right now. If you drive up and down the street, you'll see the red crabs and the white crab trees in full bloom, and the honeysuckles are in bloom. So the dandelions, of course, and the fruit trees, so that's where the bees get their primary source in the springtime. And they use the pollen and the nectar. Nectar is the sweet stuff that the flowers give to the bee, and they use that to produce the honey, and the pollen produces the brood food to raise the babies. So I did bring my observation hive, and I think the first thing we'll do is I'll have you come up in groups and you can look at this observation hive. You can find the queen bee, and then I'll go from there because it might, the sun's at a perfect angle right now. I don't want the bees to get chilled, so I got an insulated blanket on them. So I'll just remove this here, and then we can see the bees before it gets cold, because when the sun sets it gets kind of cold. So I had this set up in my room in my house, and I observe it all winter long. It lives all winter. There's a little tube right here. I put a little dairy hose going outside of a window sill, and they can go out and get water. They can get pollen and honey and everything they need for their hive. So if you want to come up here in small groups, maybe this group could come first, and I will show you the queen bee, and I'll show you the different stages of the brood.
Okay, you guys want to see? Come on. Are you ready to see the bees?
You can take my spot, so go. You want to see the queen bee? You don't have to be scared, honey. They can't get out of there.
But can you see all
They
these?
cannot get out of
Those are
there.
all the worker bees. They're the ones that do all the work. You want to touch a bee? Well, if I had a drone, here's a drone right here. Now he's the boy. He doesn't have a stinger, and he doesn't have. His only job is to mate with the queen bee in springtime. And you don't find them in the wintertime. They get kicked out. But the queen bee is quite a bit bigger than the workers. She has a longer. It's called the abdomen.
So the queen bee is bigger than all the normal bees?
Yeah, she
Did you
is.
see her, Lyric, or not?
No.
Oh.
Let's see if she's in the back.
Would you like
She's in the back.
That is so cool. Wow.
Let me see.
You see the drones right here? Drone?
Yeah.
The big drone right there is the boy.
Yeah.
That's his only job. Yeah. And he keeps the warmth of the hive. Here's the queen bee.
Oh, I want to see the
See
queen
how
bee.
long her abdomen is?
Let me see
You
the
guys
queen
remember
bee.
the 3 parts of an insect from school?
No, I didn't learn that yet.
Oh, right there she is. She's laying an egg right now. See how she's tipping her abdomen into a cell? She's laying an egg. What she does first, she inspects it to make sure it's clean and polished, that there's not an egg in there yet, and then she lays an egg. Can you see all these bees around her?
Yeah.
That's her court. Every queen and king has a court, and they kind of
Cool.
take care of the queen. They groom her, and they lick her abdomen because she exudes a perfume. Yep, that's her. Yep, look at how long her abdomen is right now. You're learning, yeah, and I'm enjoying teaching. And so the queen bee can lay up to 1,500 to 2,000 eggs at one day in her prime. And she's in her prime right now in springtime. Can you see her right there?
Yeah, is there more queen bees?
Well, that's a good question. There's only one queen bee in a hive because they sting each other if there's more than one. And what they do, sometimes a mother and a daughter will work together for a while, but it's unusual. There's usually only one queen per hive.
Mama,
There's one queen per hive, and about, when they're in their peak, there's 60,000 workers to collect the honey, and then there's several hundred drones. And this is called bridge or bird comb. It bridges one surface to the next surface.
No.
No, you're not scared of bees?
There's more drones up there. So this is a complete mini hive. This is a complete mini hive. That's a very interesting book. So in a normal hive, this is just a sample hive. These are called frames. Each one of those 3 things is called a frame, and there's 10 of them in a 10-frame laying straw. It's called beehive. That means the standard beehive. And so you can stack 2 on there, and then you can put honey supers or shallower And they always store honey above the brood nest.
They're so cool.
You guys want to come up? Might as well have everybody come up while we got the queen bee here.
Oh, I'm not comfortable with that.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, at least you're on.
They're very
We
squirmy.
can go back so they can see it.
So anyway,
You guys,
see
it's
this
a-
brown cap right
guys.
here?
Kiddos, we can sit down so they can go see it.
The brown
Okay.
cap, it has the little developing babies in it.
Thanks, guys.
And the worker bee takes 21 days from the time the egg is laid until the baby hatches. And the queen takes 16 days and the drone takes 24 days.
Oh, it's not the bees. It's
It's the
social
people.
distancing. Sorry.
She leaves the hive in two circumstances.
What?
One, she needs about 5 to 7 days. She'll go out and make her mating flight. She'll make up to 20 drones. And then that she has enough, she has a spermatocytes, a little organ.
My dad actually almost broke my wrist.
And that will nourish fertilize the eggs for up to 4 or 5 years, which is her lifespan.
Why? We're cool.
The other time she leaves is when if you mismanage your bees and let them get too crowded, half the bees and the queen, the old queen, will leave in a swarm. It'll be a big mass of bees flying in a circle. And they usually land on a tree temporary, and they'll send scout bees out in all directions to look for a hollow of a log or an empty beehive or something to move in to their family, start a new family. It's the way they reproduce, the whole new colony reproduces that way. Those are the only 2 occasions where the queen leaves. You guys have any questions? Were you listening to what I was saying?
Well, okay, so we had a question.
Okay.
What was your question, Maya?
Dead bees? That's a great question. She's not seeing any dead bees in here because there's undertaker bees. Undertakers take care of dead. And so when the bee dies, they're very clean. That will rot and make sticky in their hive. So they lift up the dead body and they take it out of this hole into the hole I got in the wall, and they deposit it as far away from the hive as they can get it.
How do you know which one's dead? We're watching the
Well, they don't move. Yeah, they don't have life. But these are all alive in here. And I was saying that this is the drone bee. You see the difference between the boy and the sisters? The sisters are the workers. They do all the work. They take care of the babies. They get the water. They take care of the queen bee. They do all the gathering and all the work. They clean the hive so that the queen can lay a new egg in the hive and the cell. And I was saying that this is bridge comb or bird comb. It kind of makes one surface to the other. Do you have a question, little guy?
Yeah. Can the baby bee fly?
Not right away. They can't fly right away. It takes a couple days for them to be able to fly, and they usually make an orientation flight, it's called. Like when they're about 7-8 days, they'll fly out of the coop, and they'll turn around and they'll look at the beehive. They'll look at all the stuff around them, the rocks, the trees. Now remember that in your brain. So they can travel 2 or 3 miles away from the hive to get nectar, and they know exactly the hive to come back to. The little babies, they memorize that. Did you find it?
Guys, this is really interesting.
I don't know if I can go see it without it.
She was around this area.
Get
Get travel.
That's okay. Don't you worry.
Probably pretty good.
How do you know which one is the queen?
Well, her abdomen is like twice as long as a worker, and she's got these real long legs. They're kind of like spider legs. Thank you. Let's see if we can find Mrs. Queen Bee. What I do to find a queen is I shoot my eyes like this, across there, and I go down. She usually has her, there she is. You usually see the quart of bees around here I was talking about? They're licking her, and she creates that pheromone, and that pheromone keeps the harmony in the hive. If you remove that queen within 2 hours, those bees will be making a real off hum. They know she's gone and they're frustrated, and they have to make a new one. So she keeps all the harmony in the hive. She keeps the hive happy. Watch her, she's going to lay an egg here. She's putting her head in a cell to see if it has an egg in it. If it's clean and polished by the worker bees and it doesn't have an egg, she'll tip her abdomen inside there and lay an egg. And a bee inspector who came to my house, he was very nice. He said that, well, see, she's putting her head in there to see if it's clean. And let's see if she lays an egg. Yep, she's tipping her abdomen. Yep. I thought she was. She tricked us. She tricked us. Oh, she's putting her head in another cell. Honey's good for you. Yeah, honey's really nutritious. We talk about honey. Oh, I don't know if she's going to lay an egg for you guys or not. Oh, we got dirty rooms apparently. Right.
Wait, I still the queen bee right there.
Okay, did everybody who wants to see the hive, see the observation hive?
Yes.
All right, I'll talk about some of the equipment that you need to become a beekeeper. And what a beekeeper does is he manages the bees to get maximum honey crop. That's what I do anyway. And there's other branches of beekeeping as well. Pollination, you can collect venom for people that to get immunizations. And venom is actually a product from the hive, and it's called apitherapy. And it's really good for people with arthritis or multiple sclerosis. There's many studies done that find it stimulates your immune system, and they're even finding that it cures Lyme disease. So the venom is a product that's very healthy. And if someone's allergic to bees, they can get desensitization shots. It's a diluted form of the venom. And then when you get that shot, then you will have resistance to it, so you won't swell up. Everybody gets a little bump when you get stung, but if your throat starts closing up, that's serious business. That's when you need to carry a EpiPen. Another product from the hive is beeswax. Here's a little hunk of beeswax. It's very valuable. They use it for making lip balms, cosmetics. In World War II, they used it to rub on the ropes in sailing ships so that they wouldn't rot and get wet. And here's a little piece of natural honeycomb that the bees made, and this happens to be drone comb. If you study it, it's a perfect hexagon. Hexagon is a six-sided design, and they're expert little architects to make that design. Of course, here's some of the honey that I produced last year, and I'm waiting anxiously to get the new honey crop. They're putting some honey in the supers where they store the honey, but it's not capped, it's not ripe yet, so I'm not taking any honey yet. Pollen is another product you can get from the hive, and pollen is very high in protein and amino acids that make up the proteins. And some people use it to put on their cereal, and
It's crunchy, right?
it's kind of crunchy, yeah, because they've got to dry it, otherwise it will mold. And so it's a little crunchy. But when you get raw local pollen, like from the trees that the bees have been, and the plants that the trees have been pollinating, you get a little bit of pollen in your body, and usually in the off season, and you sometimes will have a non-recognizable reaction to it, and your body's building immunities to that ragweed or whatever you happen to be allergic to at that time. So it builds up your immune system, the pollen. Now I'll get to the tools of the trade. This is called a hive tool. It's a little spring steel, little wedgy tool, and you use it to separate the frames. There's another product from the hive is called propolis, or propolis. In Greece, it means the beginning of a city, and it's a glue that the bees use to glue. It's that brown stuff along the edges here. They seal all the cracks. It's like they're putty.
They produce it themselves?
They produce it themselves. Well, no, it's produced on tree bugs. When a tree gets wounded, it'll exude this sticky material, and that's what they use. So that's the hive tool. It's used mostly to pry and to scrape the comb off. The next most important tool is the smoker. And the smoker consists of a bellows and a fire pot. This is a fire pot right here. And if you open it up, you'll see there's a little screen in there. So the burning material is held up by that screen. And you put pine needles in there or old rags or whatever you got, and you light it up, And some people use these little pellets, wood stove pellets, and then you just puff on it, and it puts oxygen in there through those pores. And then a nice cool billow of smoke keeps the bees calm.
So if you have a hive in your backyard,
I
do you
do.
need a smoker?
That's a great question. My friend Donna Palmer and I, she wanted to be my apprentice. I said, well, where do you live? She said, I live in the city of Delavan. I said, they have ordinances against bees. She said, well, let's change that. I said, okay.
I am.
So we propositioned the city, and they unanimously changed the law to allow 2 hives in the city and an observation hive.
do you know about the town?
I live right in the city.
Okay.
It costs $50 for the permit, and then you got to fill out a little permit, follow their rules.
Rick, did you hear the question? What about the town of Delavan? Town of Delavan.
I'm not sure if they have ordinances or not. If you got enough acreage, like for having horses, I don't think that they would complain about the bees. So the next thing you need is protective equipment. And this is called a bee veil. It's just basically a net with a helmet, like a pith helmet they use on safaris. This keeps the bees from stinging you in the face. Now, I would recommend everybody to wear one. I don't wear one myself because I'm used to the bees. I've been doing it for so long that I kind of in tune with them, and I know when they get angry, and I know to be real calm and be quiet around them. And I do get stung periodically, but it's a rare occasion. And I don't mind getting my apitherapy. Keep me strong and healthy.
Can you wear it?
You can put it on. Maybe you can get a picture. Maybe someone can take a picture with it with you on. With it on. The tag goes in the back, just like in your shirt, like when you wear a shirt. Look at that, we got a budding beekeeper. Nice. So here's another real fancy bee suit. This is they use this kind of suit in Africa with the Africanized bees. And if you wear this suit, you're virtually being sting-proof because it's double ply. It's got a double screen and it's vented so you don't get too sweaty in it. And it's got a zipper veil. And it's got tight around the ankles, tight around the wrists. So it's virtually sting-proof, this outfit right here. And here's some leather gloves you can also wear that are vented, and they got the gauntlets. And so sure, you can put them on. Absolutely.
So with that one though, you wouldn't necessarily wear the helmet.
No, this has its own helmet with it. Yep. Yeah.
Probably not because of the little holes.
And they use black, so when you're looking for the queen or whatever, it's easier to see the bees through the black screen. But yeah, this is a nice suit here. I worked with a commercial beekeeper who travels California, and he migrates. And there were so many bees in the air that I put my suit on because I knew that they were just back from California. They had a long trip and they were a little angry, and so I wore my full suit to help him. I gave him a day of work. So you're probably wondering how do you buy bees, or how do you get them in the first place? There's 2 different ways. In late winter, early spring, they're really busy in California and Georgia shaking packages. So they take these frames of bees like this, and there's a funnel, and they shake them into these cages right here. And this happens to be a 3-pound package. You get 3 pounds of bees, which is probably about like 6,000 bees. And then there's a little queen bee that hangs in her own little cage, independent of her family. And there's a cork on one end, and then there's a candy in here, queen candy. And you take that cork out and you put it in your hive after you shake the bees in, and then they chew that candy out, and there's a gradual release. They release her gradually so that, through all the trauma of getting shook into the hive, sometimes they'll be aggressive toward the queen, but this gives them a gradual time to settle down and get to know her, and then they'll chew that candy out in 2 days or so, and then they'll all be one good unit.
So Rick, when they put the bees in the container, they're not necessarily already oriented to each other. It's the queen that brings them together?
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, because they have these big shaker boxes where they'll just shake these from all different kinds of hives, you know, and then they're all confused, but they get along because they don't have a home to defend or whatever, and they share their scent, and then when they shake them all in here and put the queen bonds them all, and by the time they get transported back 3-4 days on the road, they're all one big happy family.
Huh, how do they put the queen in that little box?
Well, you got to pick her up by the wings and just
Okay.
stick her head inside that little hole and then blow on her or whatever, and then she tumbles into there, and then you put the cork on her.
Is
Yeah.
she already? Oh, you know what? He's got a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have a question?
Yeah. Wait. I forgot what I was gonna say.
That's okay. You'll remember it soon. Okay. Did you want to finish your question?
Oh yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I learned at school that there's like a really big hive with like a lot of bees in it.
Where?
I think it's in like California.
There's big hives all over the place, and if they swarm, there'll be a big ball in the tree, and then you have to call the city or call a beekeeper, and he can come and collect that and put it in a new hive, and then you got a new there's queen in there, and there's bees, and you have a new hive. Sometimes they move in buildings, and then you have to cut the boards out and remove the hive from the building. My friend just did that. She interned with me when we did a cutout on someone's house. We had to take the floorboards off and take the comb out and put it in a new hive. And so she did it all she did it with a friend of hers, and they got it out successfully. So when you get a bee package from California, it comes with a can of feed that's in here. And there's like 3 holes popped in the bottom, and it drips a little bit of syrup so they can
I need to go
have
somewhere.
nourishment. And so what you do is you take that can out, and then take the queen out and make sure she's alive. Sometimes they die in transport. So then you take this, you just slam it on a surface kind of hard, and all the bees will go down. And then you turn it over and you just shake. You just shake this package, and all those bees come tumbling out. And I kind of do a glancing blow like that, and then get them all to the corner, and like a bouncing ball of bees, they bounce right out through the hole here down into the hive.
What do you do if the mother queen, if she dies?
Well, she'll die in transport sometimes because it's trauma for them to be transported. You just call the person you bought it from, and they'll refund you a queen.
But then you have to order a new one, right?
Yeah, you can order a new queen.
And then will the bees survive while they're waiting?
Well, if you leave them without a queen for like 3 weeks, they'll start being drone layers. A drone layer, you need a fertile egg to become a worker. A drone is called haploid. It only has half the genetic complement. It has half the chromosomes of a regular bee. And so what happens is the workers will start feeding each other royal jelly out of desperation, and then their ovaries will quasi-develop into they're kind of a mutant queen, and they can start laying eggs, but they're not fertile. They don't have the capacity to mate, and they don't have the reproductive organs to make fertile, nice bees like a queen does. So that hive is hopelessly doomed if you don't catch that right away. If you don't, if you're queenless for an extended period of time, it's really hard to requeen a drone layer, because they're loyal to those workers that they've been feeding royal jelly to. They think that that's their queen, but they're doomed to vanish if they don't get corrected. It's a real problem. So, any questions so far on anything that I've covered? The equipment?
When the queen arrives when you order your queen and she comes with the bees, is she already fertile?
Yeah, she's already been mated in California, but sometimes there's a problem in early spring when it's cool and the drones aren't flying, because she'll mate with each queen will mate with up to 20 drones. So if you got thousands and thousands of queens in a yard, that's a lot of drones. So if it's too early in spring and the drones aren't flying, they won't have their full complement of sperm in their spermatheca, which is a little circular organ in their body which nourishes the sperm and it keeps it alive for years. Then she will fail and the queen can become a drone layer if she runs out of sperm. So sometimes they're faulty queens. I raised my own queens here. I just harvested my first batch of queens in sold 30 today. But they're all local. And my bees are like, I call them vortex survivors. I have a 2-year-old queen that survived 2 vortexes. And so she's my mama that I use to raise babies from. And then I put drone comb. This is that little piece of honeycomb, that's drone comb. I have frames like this with drone comb on it, and I put that in my most favorite overwintered hives so I can flood my bee yard with all these males that have good qualities for overwintering. So my queens are really in demand. I can't produce enough queens to meet the demand for local, hardy, wintered over queens. I also sell nuclear colonies, or we call them nukes in the trade. It's a poly box that holds 5 of these frames, and there's a queen that's been bred, and I overwinter the queens in there. I breed them in early fall. And then I have more demand than I have supply of those as well, because people want bees that are going to survive the winter. If you get a California queen or a Georgia queen, they're not adapted to our climate. They haven't suffered through these vortexes like we have. And so they oftentimes will die during the winter time. Question?
Do the bees get pollen from the flower?
They do, yeah. Bees, I call them the messenger. They're like a love messenger for the flower, because the flower can't get its pollen from one flower to the next without the bee to help. So the bee lands on the flower, and it's got, did you ever take a balloon in the wintertime and rub it in your head and then stick it to the ceiling? It's called static electricity. You should try it sometime, it's fun. We did it when we were kids. But the bees have static electricity in their little tiny hairs, and the pollen is attracted to those hairs, and it sticks on there like glue. And then when they take their little, they have like a little comb on their leg, and they comb that pollen all off of their body, and then they stuff it into their pollen baskets. They got these little baskets in the back of their legs, and they'll fill them up with pollen, and you can see them flying with these big balls on each leg. And then they use that pollen for brood rearing and to make royal jelly to feed the queen.
It looks like that's the juice inside of the flowers.
Yep, the stem brings the juice up, and then the nectar is secreted along with the pollen. And the nectar is like the little gift that the flower gives the bee in exchange for taking its pollen to another plant to make more. See all the little seeds on there? That's because the bees pollinate on them. Now, every 3rd bite of food that you take is directly responsible for bee pollination. Apples, strawberries, and it's just tremendous. So if we lose our bees, we're in big trouble, because we really need them for the food we eat. Some of the problems facing bees are loss of habitat due to farming practices, and green chemlawns are coming around and killing all the forage for the bees. And the farmers can get a little extra for their corn, so they're plowing all the hedgerows down. A hedgerow is like a line of trees and bushes between the fields. And so they're burning and plowing them down to get more corn or whatever they're growing. And that's hurting the habitat for the bees, both native and domestic bees. And
Do you
question?
insulate?
I'm sorry?
Do you insulate the hives over the
I do
winter?
insulate mine, and I've been experimenting with using, it's a black shrink wrap that's a real thicker gauge, and it's got UV inhibitors in it, so the sun's not going to make it deteriorate over the winter. So I put foam board in the back, and then I wrap it with that black shrink wrap. And when it on a sunny day, like if it's like 40 degrees and the sun's hitting that black, it will be able to come out and make a cleansing flight. The bees will not go to the bathroom in the winter, in their hive. Normally, they're very clean. So they'll wait until 45 degrees on a calm day to go out and make a cleansing flight. They're going to the bathroom outside. If they can't go get out, like if we have an extended period of time, 45 days without a break, sometimes they get dysentery and it builds up in their stomach and they just go, and then they try to clean it up and they all die because they have dysentery. But
all this for a bee.
all that for a bee, yeah, all that for a bee. So yeah, I do wrap mine with a little bit of insulation. In a natural log house where they would be, that's real thick wood like this, and it has a great R value for insulating the hive. So the thin little beehives we use is 3/4 inch pine. That allows that cold to penetrate. Another important thing is to position your bees facing south or southeast, where they can get the morning sun, and then in the wintertime that helps warm them up to go out and make a cleanse too.
You're saying like where they would exit from the hive to the south or southeast?
Yeah, front of the hive, the exit of the hive should face south or southeast is preferable. And then you should have a northwest windbreak of a fence or a hedgerow or some bushes. I have a really nice privet hedge, and then I put up a fence to block the wind on mine. A question back there?
Yeah, how much daily or weekly maintenance is involved with having just like a backyard hive?
A backyard hive, you're going to probably check them this time of the year every 10 days, and you're just going to make sure they have enough room to expand. It's easy when you first start out because you shake your package and then you got your queen and they're making new wax, and you're just feeding them sugar syrup, 50-50 sugar syrup, until the flowers start blooming in mass, until they can get their own supply. You're kind of priming them. But they need a lot of carbohydrates to make wax. It's like 7 pounds of nectar to make 1 pound of wax. So you got to feed them in that point until they get on their own. And so it doesn't take a lot of time for a couple hives, but when you're producing honey and doing the queens and all this other stuff, and you got overwintered hives that are busting at the seams that need to be split so they don't swarm, you artificially split them so they don't swarm. It's a little more involved. But yeah, and I have a mentoring program the Wisconsin Honey Producers offers to buy youngsters beehive, and they have to do fill out a certain little application for it, but then they match the child with a mentor. So I'm working with a little boy named Colton, and so I think he's 12 or 13, and he's just a great little learner. He makes notes and hive notes, and he's really a great student, and it's a great program to financially help these kids get a beehive, because we got to get some young people into bees. It's all of agriculture is aging, and there's not a lot of young people taking the place of agriculture, unfortunately, because we all need food, and it's a lot of hard work, but we all need food.
I have another question, sorry. If you have a backyard hive and you have neighbors that use repellents or sprays, insecticides, what happens to your hive? Did they bring it back?
Well, I do have neighbors that use True Green, and they do spray. My bees seem to be doing okay. I'm more worried about children and pets that sniff in that stuff, and it's cancer causing. And unfortunately, the school down the way, I live right by the school, and I saw some kids playing soccer, and then I looked, and there was a white tag there that said pesticide application, and they're licking, they're rubbing their face with all this chemical on it with the ball, and I got concerned, and I called the lady who's in charge of that, and I wasn't getting anywhere with her, so I got a little frustrated with that, trying to get her to stop that, because it's not healthy for children, and a lot of pets walk along that, they walk their dog and they'll sniff the grass, and they come with, they get nasal cancer and stuff. So, and not only that, but amphibians, you used to see a lot of salamanders and snakes and frogs, in the grass on a wet day, and you don't see too many anymore because they slither through that chemical and they absorb it to their skin and die. So, I wish that people were more ecologically minded and thought about more of the environment. I love dandelions. I mean, they're beautiful flowers. I even eat them in springtime. They're good to eat, and people make wine out of them. And I guess we got to change our mindset on things, Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, they say, and I believe that's true. So those are good questions. It's basically education, educating the public and educating the people who are in charge of these properties. And we don't need that. It's the robins and stuff, the worms, that stuff kills everything. So any other questions, or
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll if there's no more further questions, I'll talk a little bit. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Do you have that pipe open? That little.
This pipe is not open right now. But this is just a stopper, and then I put a dairy hose on there that goes out my windowsill, and I cut a hole in the windowsill, and the bees can go out and fly, and on a nice day they'll fly. It's really fun to see the bees come back after they've made a flight, because they do what's called a waggle dance. They wag their little abdomens, and a scientist in Germany, his name was Karl von Frisch, did a lot of research with bees, and he put little dishes of sugar in different spots, and then he'd kind of mark the bees and find out which dish they used, and then he'd study the dance. And then he found out it's a language that the bees use to communicate, and they use the direction of the sun and angles, you know, to find the source. And so the faster the waggle, the more abundant the source. And then they make a figure 8 usually, and then waggle, figure 8, waggle this way, figure 8. And the distance that they waggle has to do with the distance where the source is. And then there's a bunch of bees, kind of like attendants of the queen, that are attending that waggle dance, and then they get a little taste of the nectar and a little bit of the pollen. So when they're flying in the vicinity of that source, they kind of hone in on it and get the nectar. And then they'll come back, and they'll come back with full pollen baskets or full honey tanks, and then they'll share it. And before you know it, there's just bees going out like crazy to get that source. They're really intelligent little creatures. The more you work with them, they're just fascinating. You have a question?
Yeah. What is that little container?
Oh, this little container?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about mites. I mentioned some of the problems that are facing bees. Well, habitat loss for one, and then this is a little mite. They're little tiny brown things that are on the bottom of this, and I'll pass it around and you can look at them. Don't drop it though, because I think it's glass. But they're very small, and they're parasites that get on the bee, and they eat the fat from the bee, from the baby bee. And they allow viruses and infections to get in that wound on the baby bee. And so if you had a parasite the size of that on you, it'd be the size of a dinner plate, you know, using proportions. And so they just really irritate the bees, and that's what causes winter loss, is mites.
And deformities too.
And
right?
deformity. They get deformed wings, and their lifespan is greatly reduced, so they don't survive the winter. There are, what I've been using is organic acids, formic acid and oxalic acid in different, like a vapor form or a drip. And that the inspector came out, the state inspector came out, and she checked 4 hives, and I only had 1 mite in all the 4 hives she checked, which is excellent. And when I find 1 mite, I treat all of the whole yard gets treated, because I want to make sure they don't build up and then get, you know, because they can reproduce really exponentially, especially on the drones. So there's cures for it, but if you got some organic beekeepers that don't treat at all, and in the bee trade we call them mite bombs, because they collapse oftentimes in the fall. And they got a bunch of honey, and they collapse, and then your bees will come to rob that honey from that weak hive, because it's the dearth in autumn, and they're desperate to get stuff stored for winter. So they'll bring back a whole new load of mites into your hive. Even if they've been treated and they're free of mites, you get a whole new load of mites in your hive. So a friend of mine suggested an idea for that. She said, wait till after a hard frost, like the end of November, and then vaporize them for the mites. Because all those mite bomb ones are dead already, and there's not robbing going on after a frost. I mean, they're kind of getting hunkered down for winter. So I give them 2 treatments of that oxalic acid vapor. It's a little tool that heats up and it vaporizes this oxalic acid, and the mites just drop off of them like crazy. That's what I did last year, and I had wonderful wintering success. I had about a 90% wintering success this winter, and the average for Wisconsin is a 50% overwintering success, which is pretty dismal. Think if like dairy cattle, if 50% of the dairy cattle died every year, they'd be doing something about it real quick. But there's ways to keep them alive, and beekeeping is a lot of experimentation with different techniques and sharing. You know, we have a bee club, and we all share our knowledge, things that are working, things that are not working.
I want to be a bee club.
You want to be a beekeeper? A beekeeper? Oh, you want to join the bee club? Well, you can join it. It's called the Walworth County Bee Club, and it's online, and you can find it on there. And yeah, that'd be fun for you guys to join the bee club, because you can learn a lot. There's other people just starting out. Some people just go there to learn and see if it's, you know, it's for them. What I would advise anybody to do before you even start thinking about getting a hive is go along with the beekeeper and see if you like it. You know, get a feel for it, get a feel for the equipment, and learn about what's involved with it. And you can save yourself a lot of money and time if you get your feet wet without investing a lot of money in it, because it's expensive. Wood is very expensive now, and those frames are all wood, and you know, it's just everything's inflation has gone up on everything. So, any more questions about wintering? How the bees winter? We didn't talk about wintering the bees. We have a little bit of time left.
About 4 minutes.
I'll cover wintering. So I do wrap my bees for winter, and what the bees do during the winter is they form like a football-sized cluster in the middle of the hive, and they don't hibernate. Honeybees are one of the few insects that do not hibernate. They form a large cluster, and the queen stays in the middle of that cluster. And for part of the winter, they're broodless, meaning they don't have any brood. They're not raising any bees, so they don't have to keep the temperature so warm. For brood, they have to keep it about 95 degrees in the middle of that cluster so that the brood doesn't chill. If it chills, it dies. So, known about January, the second week of January, the queen will start laying a few eggs, and then they will have to raise their temperature to keep that critical brood temperature so the babies can develop properly. And what oftentimes happens is they'll eat the honey around the periphery of that brood nest, and if it's frigid, cold, sub-zero, they don't heat the whole hive. Like we heat our whole house, they just heat the immediate area around the cluster. And the bees on the inside, they eat honey for energy, and they shake their wing muscles, and that makes heat come out. And the ones on the outside form an insulating ball to trap that heat inside. And then they rotate. The ones on the outside that are getting kind of cold and they're getting weary of being outside against the cold, they'll go to the middle and warm up and eat some honey. And then the ones that have been eating honey and shaking their wings, they will go in and out and become insulating blanket, and they will they can rest. They don't have to be shaking their wings all the time. So they constantly rotate, you know. And the queen always stays in the middle where it's the warmest. And it's so if you got some honey and they've eaten all the honey and it's sub-zero for weeks on end, they will not leave that brood to get to adequate honey stores. That's why that black shrink wrap is so important, because when the sun hits it, it warms that hive enough that they can move slightly to get on the fresh honey reserves to make it warm enough that they can consume it. So, well, I want to thank you all for your great questions and your interest. It's been fun for me.